Welcome everyone to my classroom management series called Learning with Laceville. In this first session, we're going to be diving into the first days of school. We're going to look at specific things that you need to focus on as you're teaching the first days of school. We're going to look at routines and strategies that you can use to help organize that first day of school, and specific things that maybe you didn't think that you needed to be thinking about, but should be thinking about. So there's a lot of great information out there about things that you should be doing in the classroom on the first days of school. And again, that information is fantastic, wonderful, and great. And I'm not saying don't do those things. What I'm saying is a lot of times we get the words what you should do and what you have to do confused with the first days of school. So this is specifically going to be looking at structures and routines that have to happen on that first day of school, and specifically four that will kind of surprise you that, again, you're gonna have to do on that first day. Okay, so here's the four. Bathroom, very important. They're gonna have to do it throughout the day, and they're probably gonna have to do it more than once. Eating, that's right, whether it be breakfast or lunch, they're gonna be eating throughout the day, so we gotta be thinking about that. Also, transitions. How are students going to go from one location to the next? And then finally, dismissal. That's right. We're all afraid of it. We all overplan for this one, but we're going to talk about how to make dismissal less stressful as you plan for those first days of school. So again, these are the four. There's a lot of other things that you should be doing, like learning kids' names, greeting them at the door, putting name tags on not only tables, but possibly chairs and cubbies, and those things should happen. But I want to specifically look at the four things that have to happen and how to structure those activities and your first few days of school. So let's talk about transitions. Transitions are where you're going to have your students go from one location to the next. And in the school, we always do that in a line. But how do you line up? And what should your line look like as you're walking throughout the building? These are going to be the type of things that we talk about, so that way as you're setting up those expectations, you're thinking about how they're going to line up. Are they going to be in a specific order? How are we going to walk in the hallway? And a lot of this information will actually depend on, does your school already have expectations that you need to make sure that you're aware of and following? Do you need to come up with your own expectations? Do those expectations differ based on the age of the kids? And will, in the eventual time of how many students you have in the classroom, that affect how you're lining your students up? So let's try to get our students in line. So one of the easiest ways to do this on the very first day of school is to put them in order. No pushing, no shoving. You want to go on and have that expectation set up. It's really nice to do this as well, because anytime that you have more structures in your classroom, it eases the tension of the entire classroom. For example, if I say green table, line up at the door, and there are 6 kids at the green table, then that's 6 kids that are jockeying for position to try to be the first one in line. And that tends to cause a problem, and not the precedent you want to set on the very first day of school. You want to make sure that your room feels comforting and inviting and structured enough that the kids know that when they're there, that they're safe, that they're cared for, and that you have a plan for their success in the classroom. So we're not just going to call big groups to line up all at once. You're actually going to have a specific structure that you have in place that's going to work best for you. So first off, let's look at the really young kids, the kindergartners. So kindergartners are really going to need a lot of structure. And what I like to do, besides just putting name tags on students' desks, I also like to give those name tags a number. And then on the floor in front of the door, I have circles. Those circles are also numbered as well. Now, the great thing is students will see the numbers on their desk. They will also see the corresponding matching numbers on the floor. And what we will do is we will do some sort of fun activity that has each student line up, in this case, in numerical order. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that each circle that's on the floor already set up has enough space so that students can stand in that circle and they can kind of feel those personal boundaries that they should already have as they're getting in line and not line up too close. It also lets the students know that I'm going to have them in a specific order. So there's no reason to run and try to hurry to get in a certain spot, because I'm wanting you to be on that number. And so then what we do is, depending on usually if there's something fun going on, that kids are really enjoying, I'll use that strategy as they're lining up. So then specifically, I will model the expectation first of how I want them to line up. We will discuss that as we're lining up. I would like for your arms to be folded, or I'd like for your hands to be in your pocket. Whatever you feel as though that you, as the teacher, can strictly enforce and be consistent with from day one throughout the entire school year. The school that you're in may already have these expectations set up, so don't change those. You want to keep consistent with what your school has in place. So based on that, come up with a plan so that way you know where a kid's going to put their hands. That's the first thing. Second, when you have and model the expectation, you're going to do that. You're going to show them if it's folded, folding them. If it's hands in pockets, handing. If it's putting your hands behind your back, there's several variations. But again, you want to think about that and model that for your students to see as they're walking to line up. The next thing that I'm going to do after I show them the expectations is I'm going to let number one, whoever is number one, come up and show that to the class. Now that I've modeled it, I'm now going to have a student model that expectation, so that way the class can see it. The last thing that I'm going to do is a fun activity and a celebration. So, since dabbing has been really big lately, one thing that we did when we lined up was we did a dab and a ooh yeah. And so the way that it looked was as you were walking to line up, or as I was walking to line up, I would say, now that I'm in the appropriate spot that I'm supposed to be, in this case number one, I'm going to do a celebratory dab, and then the class is going to do an ooh yeah. And so then we model that. So then I do the dab, and then I point to the class and they say ooh yeah. Now I'm going to do this for each and every student as they line up. Praising them when they're walking slowly, praising them when they put their hands where I've told them, praising them when they're standing on the appropriate number, and then once they're there, I'm going to say dab, and then they dab, and then the whole class goes ooh yeah. And so this way, each kid, from the moment that they walk into the room, the first thing that we're doing is not only teaching them a very important structure, transitions, that they're going to use throughout the day, but we're immediately making them feel special. We're doing something that's celebrating a positive expectation being met. And as we continue to look at these other ones, we're going to continue to talk about how to make each kid, when they do the expectation that you set for them, feel really, really great on that very first day of school. So let's keep it going. Now that we're already in line, we're going to transition to our first location, and that's the bathroom. Again, one of the 4 things that your students are going to have to do is use the restroom. My schools that I've been in have always done breakfast, and students, no matter the age, always need to go to the bathroom right after. So I make sure that I use this time to go ahead and do a whole classroom break. The reason why, sometimes you may have students that have never been in your building. They don't know where the bathroom is. Other times you have students that may not know proper bathroom etiquette, and I want to make sure from day one I'm establishing exactly what I want them to do when they're in the bathroom. So we walk down the hallway. I'm praising and celebrating students that are walking in the hallway correctly. If you have hallway expectations, now is the time to be discussing those as you're walking down the hallway and letting students know what those might be. And then now that we're at the restroom, I will actually separate the boys and the girls into 2 groups, and we will make sure there's no one in the restroom. That's part of making your script and making sure that you've communicated with other teachers in the building that you're going to be teaching restroom expectations during this time of the day. So then usually elementary has first, or the lower elementary has first priority. So since using kindergarten for the example still, I divide them into 2 groups. I have the girls stand over to the side, also in the restroom. Again, you have to think about how your restroom is laid out, and the boys on the other side. So as I stand to where the boys are, I specifically give them the expectations of this is what the stall looks like, this is how to lock the stall, this is the urinal, this is how to flush the urinal, this is how many times I want you to flush the urinal, this is the sink, this is the hot and the cold, this is the soap dispenser, this is how it works. And all this may seem kind of silly, but when you think about it, it's not. You're going to have students, since I've taught in inner city for a while, you're going to have students that have possibly never seen a soap dispenser, so they may not know how it works, or may not know the hot and the cold, or may not have seen it and know how to flush, or if it's an automatic flush, they may be trying to find the handle and feel silly when all they have to do is walk away and the toilet flushes on their own. Again, you're trying to set up these expectations so that kids feel comfortable, even when they're using the restroom on the first day. especially since younger kids may not know these things and they may be going in a group or with more than one student in the restroom with them. You want to make sure that they're confident, even if something as silly as using the restroom, because you want them, no matter the activity, to know what's expected and to be successful in that activity. So yes, we cover everything when it comes to restroom expectations. And then we talk about leaving the restroom, where we're going to stand, on what side of the hallway, and how we do that. Same thing with the girls. We talk about proper etiquette on how to lock the door, how to knock and not look under the stall, which is a huge issue with girls. We also talk about soap dispensers, how to wash, a song that they can sing when they're washing their hands to make sure that they've done that properly. So again, as you're setting up these expectations, you're knowing they're going to have to use the restroom. So in your script, you have a plan for, this is the expectations that I'm going to make sure I cover with them when they're in the restroom. On top of that, don't forget your school may already have expectations. I know my school does, that they post in the bathroom. So we read through these signs before we practice those expectations. Then we let the kids go to the restroom. We line back up in that number order. And again, this is going to be one of those things that you're going to have to remind them. So you have a roll and a list in your hand already in number order. And so you're just putting those students back in that order as they're coming out of the restroom. So that's covering bathrooms, talking about bathrooms, something that your students are going to be doing more than once on that first day. So again, it's a have to, something they're having to do, and you're going to have to cover and set those expectations. So eating is a big one, and we want to make sure that we're looking at eating and how to do that. A lot of times teachers will completely forget to do this. One thing that I love about my school is that we have specific times in the morning that we'll sign up for that students can go through and practice how to actually do the cafeteria. Now, one of the reasons why you may need to do this is because you may have specific tables that your students are numbered and they have to sit at. So you want to make sure that they're aware of that before they go into lunch, because lunch is also a short amount of time for many students. So you don't want to waste any time with them trying to figure things out, or for you to have to figure things out on the first day. And so that way, since we've planned ahead of time and we've set a structured time for us to practice in the cafeteria, that will actually allow for that time for you to actually be able to eat on the first day, which a lot of times doesn't happen for most teachers because they're doing so much of this during cafeteria instead of before they ever get to the cafeteria. So first off, you want to set up a time that you can go. You want to make sure that you understand the procedures. Do you have a specific door that your class has to go into? Is there a specific line that you need to be on or standing on as you're waiting? Are your forks and silverware, napkins and straws in two different locations? Are they all in the same locations? You want to cover on how to get those things, what things that they're going to need. And also, as they're going through a line, something that was really unique for me having come into the classroom and seeing now cafeteria expectations is that when I was in school, I just got my food and left, but now students are having to make more selections on their own. And specifically in our building, they have to choose a certain amount of things. And so I got to cover that with them. So that way on the first day, especially for those little ones, they're not going up there and not knowing what to grab or how many to grab. And so we got to cover that before we ever go. Again, it's going to save them time and save me time as well. So again, I come up with a plan for cafeteria based on the background knowledge that I've built up. And then with that plan, we go in and we practice. We practice how to stand in line as we're waiting. We practice how to get things. And again, with the younger kids, you have to teach them, this is where you should be sitting your milk on your tray. These are where you're going to be grabbing these items. This is how many you need to get. When you come to the cafeteria, some students now have lunch numbers that they need to enter in, or they may not. They may just on the first day have the students say their first and last name. So we have to practice as they come through the line. I'm standing there, them telling me their first and last name and speaking loudly and clearly so the cafeteria worker can get their name down, and then they can go ahead and go through line and then sit at the table. Now, I recommend, and we try to do this, at least 2 to 3 times before we get to the cafeteria. So I set out a block of time where we will actually go, we'll do this, we'll sit down, we'll line back up, practice again, sit down, line back up, practice again, and sit down. Again, that repetition is just letting the kids know, this is how it's going to go. It takes another stressful environment that could be cafeteria and makes it a little less stressful because the students are knowing the expectations. And one thing that I like to do is I'm giving expectations, I always give an explanation. One thing that I like to say is never give an expectation without an explanation. And so the whole time that I'm saying this is how I want you to line up, or this is why I'm wanting you to put this here, I'm explaining that to the kids. I'm always reminding them that I have their best interest in mind, and I know that this is the best and easiest way to do an activity, or the safest way to do an activity, or the way that's going to make them the most successful in that activity. And I feel as though those explanations, besides the expectations, put students at ease. So even with cafeteria, we're going to cover and make sure that we practice that well before we actually get into the cafeteria and eat lunch the first day. Dismissal is big. This is probably the one that gives teachers the most stress, and I would completely be there with all those teachers because you want to make sure that you're not the teacher that gets a student in the wrong spot. So one thing that I recommend is that we think about dismissal just like we thought about these other activities, that you set out a time in your script for the first day that you've practiced dismissal. Again, some schools may build this in. I know my school builds this in, and so we have a time before dismissal where everybody is practicing. Again, the younger the kids are, the more the practice is going to need to happen. My fourth graders that I'm currently teaching, those students have done this dismissal expectation for a while, so now it's just reviewing and covering. I still practice because I want to make sure that they're meeting my dismissal expectations. If it's a 0 voice level dismissal, or if there are certain things that I'm needing them to get in a process to pack up their backpack correctly. But the younger kids, they're going to need a lot more structure. And so you want to make sure that you have a big block of time to discuss how they're going to line up, where they're going to line up, and how you're going to get them home safely. Really, really important to do this. And also with dismissal, you're going to have a lot of back time before this all happens and before the first day that you're going to need to put in. One thing that parents tend to do on the first day of school is do something different than students would normally do every day. For example, a lot of times students who ride the bus home will not ride the bus home the first day. First day can be stressful, not only for kids, not only for teachers, but also for parents. And there are times when parents might forget to send a note to the office or to call the office or to let somebody know that there's something different happening that first day. That's where you as the teacher have to be doing a lot of background information at the beginning. Luckily, you'll have open houses, back to school events where you'll be meeting parents. I like to get a chart out and list all the students on that chart, and then as I meet the parents, I will write down the answers to questions like, hey, how are your students getting home on the first day of school? Have you thought about if you want them to ride the bus or if you plan on picking them up? We have that conversation and I write that down. And I try to make sure at all those events I knock out as many students as I can, getting that background information on there. I also make sure that during that time I'm reminding parents to make sure, don't forget to let the office know, because parents, especially for the kindergartners, they're signing up for the first time. They're filling out transportation forms as well during those open houses, and they're letting you know how they are going to get home most of the time. But again, sometimes that changes. So you just want to make sure that you're having conversation with parents beforehand. I also like to, a couple days before school begins, make a courtesy call just to let parents know school's getting ready to start. Did you have any questions about school supplies? Any first day questions? And also I make sure that I ask, after I've called all the parents, what are you doing on the first day when it comes to dismissal? This is what I have down, but I just wanted to double check because my priority is making sure that your little one gets home safely. So I just want to double check that what we have written down is what the plan is for that first day. It does take a lot of work on the teacher's end to try to do this beforehand, but again, all the work ahead of time and planning and management strategies are just helping those activities when you get to them be less stressful. So again, dismissal can be very, very stressful. So put the work in the beginning before school ever begins. Before they leave, make sure during the school day you're practicing so that way you're comfortable with where they're going, the students are comfortable with where they're going and how they're going to get there, and then that way when you're actually dismissing, it'll go much smoother. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do, I would like to cover a few more things that you should be doing on the first day. Again, these are a little different than the have-tos, but these are things that I recommend that are very beneficial for you to do, and we call those the should-be-doing things. One of those activities is learning the kids' names. I think it's really, really great to make sure one of the first activities that you do in your room is a fun name activity to learn the kids' names. One of the ones that I have always used is the name animal combination. And the way that that works is whatever the student's name is, they think of an animal whose name begins with the same letter. It's one of those things where you may think, well, kindergarten, it might be kind of tough. Luckily, on my board behind me, I have all the alphabet set up and there's already animals for each letter of the alphabet. That way, when the student comes in and if they don't know an animal that begins with that letter name, I've already got a resource for them to use, and that way they can make that connection. The next thing is I'm trying to build these positive relationships with my students. On that first day, I'm going to start making sure each time I say that student's name, I reference the animal as well. So if it was Shad Shark, that student, each time I talk to them, be like, hey, Shad Shark. Again, it just helps that student feel special, feel appreciated, and sets that first day up to be a very positive one for the students that are in your room. So a really fun activity and something that I feel as though that you should do, and that is learn all students' names. Another thing that you should do is make sure that your students know how to get to attention. A lot of times you will have teachers use the give me five, or if your whole brain teaching experience has taught you the class, yes, yes. Both of those are really, really good. The goal here, anytime that you're doing an expectation, again, you're explaining why, but you're also making sure that you own it, that it belongs to you. It's something that you feel comfortable in using, something that you're going to use over and over again. That way it's introduced day one, and you're making sure that you're consistent throughout the rest of the school year. I like to use the word check. Now, what happens when I say check is when I say the word check, it means that I'm checking your hands, your eyes, your ears, and your mouth to make sure that they're all ready to listen. And I let them know that, again, my goal is to make sure that anytime I need to tell them really important information, I want them to get in the best possible pose that they can get to hear that information. And I know from experience that pose looks like this. And I explain why. My hands are folded because I'm not playing with anything and therefore not distracted. So I'm going to hear this really important thing my teacher needs to tell me. I'm not talking. That means I can adequately hear what my teacher is saying. So then I'm listening, I'm checking my voice, I'm checking my eyes. This one's really important too, to make sure I'm making eye contact with the teacher and I can see what they're saying as well. I let my students know to be successful in my room, I know I may need to tell you things and show you things. That's why when I say check and you get into that listening pose, it's really important that you can hear and see me, because I want to make sure that you can see what's happening and what I'm modeling, so that way you can be successful during that activity. So then really, really important to do that. Again, I got the expectation, I give them that explanation. So for me, I say check and my students get into the listening pose. For you, it may be something different. Again, just make sure that you're making a conscious, thought out choice of this is what I'm going to use and this is what I'm going to teach it throughout the day, and this is making sure I'm staying consistent all the way through. One of the last things that I recommend that you should be doing on the first day is a tour of the building. I really like using this in conjunction with my transition expectation and teaching kids how to walk in the hallway, that we take a tour of the building. Sometimes on this tour, I'll have little funny jokes or notes that are hiding throughout the building that we'll walk and go find, and it's kind of like a little treasure hunt that may take us back to the classroom, and in each piece of the treasure, it might be pieces of candy that the kids are getting or funny little jokes or notes or something. But I try to make it fun and exciting for them. Again, you want that first day to be fun and exciting. And I try to make sure that my tour takes care of some of the really important places that students are going to need to know, like the office and the ladies that work in the office, the cafeteria. I also like to take them around to the special area teachers as well, so they can see where those classrooms are located. We like to stop off at a couple different restrooms in the building as well to make sure that they know where those are. And also, I also use this time just to make sure I show them the door that we would exit in case there was a fire. You're not going to probably have a fire drill on the first day. That would be crazy. But I like to be prepared. And so since we're already taking a tour of the building, I like to show my class, hey, this is a door that's really easy to get out. We will be doing fire drills in the next couple days as we begin school. Just remember that this is the door that we're going to be going out of when we do those fire drills. The last place that I like to visit tends to be their favorite, and that's recess. One thing that when I structure my script, I structure that tour of the building ends at recess during my recess time, so that way the last thing that they do is go and play at recess. And so again, one of the really things that I feel as though it's really good to do and that you should do on the first day of school, not so much that you have to do. So hopefully this has been beneficial as we've covered them and looked at the things that you have to do and also some things that I feel as though that you should be doing. Again, there are so many more things that you should do or could do on that first day. Reading a book, for example, doing some assessing of your students and where they are as they're coming into the room. All of those things are great, and by no means am I saying don't do those things. I'm just saying if you want to have a successful classroom starting from day one, there might be some things that you need to plan for and think about and set up expectations for from the very first day. So that way the rest of the school year is more successful than it could be if all your first day was just a bunch of games and fun activities. It can still be fun and you can still do those things, but don't forget the four. Don't forget those things that they have to do and making sure that you've set up times to cover those, to explain those, and to let kids experience how to do those. So this has been video 1 in our learning series, Learning with Laceville. Hopefully you got some really good information that you'll be able to use in your classroom. Again, as we continue on, I'll be making more videos to cover specific things, maybe going a little bit more in depth on how to teach and set up an expectation that I covered in this video on that you should be doing those expectations. But the next video in our series, I'm going to specifically look at when you're designing those expectations, how to set them up, how you should do it, and then if students are not meeting those, how to then reteach and reinforce those expectations to help those expectations work.